This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, guys. Hello, Death by Southwest listeners. I was not going to do this episode on video, but I decided I am going to now. Guys, I cut my hair. So if you're looking at the video, you can see that it's super short. But this is a Tuesday episode. This is not a bonus episode. So we are not going to waste any time with catching up. I was going to talk to you about Flagstaff because obviously the episode that we were going to record in Flagstaff never happened. So I apologize about that. And also, we had a great time in Flagstaff, and sitting down and doing a podcast just didn't work into that schedule. So I do apologize, but back today with a new episode, and going to keep it real professional. So no more personal talk, no more catching up on things. Although I will say I missed you guys last week, and I hope everyone's doing well and having a wonderful week. And that's it. And then any more niceties and talking is going to happen on tomorrow's bonus episode. So today we have an episode that I want to preface from the beginning might end up being a 2-parter. It's pretty long. I don't know. I have to kind of see. I never know until I get into it. So we'll see. And there are, we've done many stories that are haunting or kind of stay with me. This is definitely one of them. The description that I have, the little teaser, is a girl goes for a bike ride and simply never comes back. No evidence of a struggle, no witnesses stepping forward, no body. And then nearly a year later, a chilling photograph surfaces in a parking lot almost 1,500 miles away. Was it her? Is she still alive? And why, after decades, do the pieces of this puzzle still not quite fit? So our story today takes place in Belen, New Mexico. I do hope to God I'm saying that right, because I did not look it up. It looks like it's a pretty easy word to pronounce, Belen. Not sure many other ways you could pronounce it, but it is often referred to as the hub city. It's about 35 miles south of Albuquerque. In 2020, the census said that the population was 7,360, so pretty small town. It's bordered by the Rio Grande to the east and the Manzano Mountains to the west. Manzano, that's really, you hear my Chicago accent come out then. The city itself of Belen is about 19 square miles and sits at an elevation of about 4,800 feet. The landscape around it is pretty fertile thanks to the Rio Grande River. So this really supports local agriculture, including the cultivation of New Mexican chilies, onions, alfalfa, and various fruits and vegetables. Hot summers. Nighttime lows are in the 60s in the summer. Winters are mild with the daytime in the 50s. It sounds a lot like Tucson, honestly. So it earned the nickname the Hub City after the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe railways completed a line through it in 1907, establishing the city as a significant railroad center. And it continues to be a transportation nexus because it has access to lots of different major highways. The Bellin Harvey House opened in 1907. It's a restored museum that once served rail passengers and workers. Just another kind of tribute to the rich railroad heritage in the city. And there are several annual events that Bellin is known for, including the St. Patrick's Day Balloon Rally, the All-American 4th of July celebration, Rio Abajo Days in September, and the Miracle on Main Street Festival and Electric Light Parade after Thanksgiving. Additionally, I shouldn't even read this because I don't know. Okay, it's a traditional, the Hispano Matanza. It's held on the last Saturday in January. It's considered the world's largest matanza, which is a traditional Spanish-style barbecue that attracts thousands of visitors. Sounds kind of fun. Okay, let's jump into our story. So I'm going to introduce you to Tara Calico. Tara Lee Calico was born on February 28th, 1969, to Patty and David Calico in New Mexico. After her parents' divorced, the family moved to Bellin, like I said, about 35 minutes south of Albuquerque. Both of Tara's parents remarried. David, her father, married a woman named Bernice, and Patty, her mother, married a man named John Dole. And this created a really blended family. She had two sisters and two brothers. So she had Michelle Dole and Deb Dole, and two brothers, Chris and Todd Calico. So from each of her parents' new marriages. Oh, sorry, I have Henry. Henry's here telling me it's dinner time, but Henry is going to have to wait. So even as a kid, Tara was super organized, super responsible. You might refer to her as a type A personality. These traits really helped her academically. She was an incredibly gifted student, really smart, driven, very independent even as a young child up into her teenage years. She was taking college classes before her senior year of high school. She was fluent in French, and she played multiple musical instruments. That is impressive. I took French in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and could maybe say a sentence. Languages is not something that came naturally to me. So that's always impressive to me when people learn languages, especially as teenagers or young adults, or of course, adults. Tara also played multiple musical instruments. I also cannot play a musical instrument. So all of these things are, when you hear about somebody who's naturally good at something that just was totally out of your comfort zone, which for me, definitely musical instruments were. I never learned how to play anything. It always seems so impressive. But for Tara, she wasn't just book smart. She was also incredibly athletic and adventurous. Friends described her as a genuinely kind person. One of her friends said, quote, "She was very independent. She definitely had a mind of her own. She was extremely bright and extremely resourceful. She was the kind of person that really everyone wanted to be friends with, kind and easygoing, and just a genuinely really fun and good person to be around." She graduated from Bellin High School in 1987, and she stayed close to home and enrolled at the University of New Mexico, Valencia. It was only about 15 minutes away from where her family was living. And she had just started her sophomore year of college. She was studying to be a psychologist, and she was balancing a pretty full schedule. She was not only studying to be a psychologist in college, but she had a part-time job where she worked at a bank. And she also had a lot of extracurricular interests and activities, as I said. She played instruments, she was fluent in languages, and she was very athletic. So since she stayed local, a lot of her former classmates also ended up at the same university. A lot of people stayed close to home. And that included a guy named Jack Cole. Tara and Jack had known each other from high school, and on campus, they reconnected, hit it off, and started dating. They both had a ton in common with each other. They both loved being outside, playing sports. They particularly liked tennis, hiking, and especially biking. So Tara was very disciplined about staying active and staying fit. She worked out every single day, and she spent as much time as possible outside. And her real passion, although she was well versed in a variety of sports and outdoor activities, her real passion was biking. So she went on bike rides almost daily, sometimes covering close to 40 miles at a time. And it really wasn't, it was a hobby, but it was more than a hobby for her. It was really part of her routine. She almost never missed it. And when she would go bike riding, she would usually go for a long bike ride along the same stretch of highway every morning. And the morning of September 20th, 1988 was no different. It was a cool but sunny morning, September 20th, 1988 in Belen, New Mexico. And remember, Belen is small. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where, bad things really didn't happen. Around 9:30 a.m., Tara, who was 19 at the time, was getting ready for her daily bike ride. She was wearing a white First National Bank of Belen t-shirt, white shorts with green stripes, ankle socks, and white and turquoise Avia tennis shoes. Avia. It's funny. I apologize for the for kind of the veering off here, but Avia tennis shoes. I've been doing the bonus episodes with my friend, former colleague Brandon, for his podcast, which is called The Devil Within. And so I've been listening to each episode, and then we get on and we do a bonus episode where we kind of break it down and I ask him questions and things like that. And I had his podcast this season is about the Night Stalker. And apparently the Night Stalker wore black on black Avia tennis shoes. And this was something that was specified in one of the episodes that we had done a bonus episode on. And Brandon specifically talks about how, like, before Air Jordans, there were Avias. And I said, it must be before my time. Like, I never heard of these. I mean, I was born in the 80s, but I was young. So I wasn't wearing Avia tennis shoes yet. And so when I read that, he said everybody had Avias. They were like very, very popular. And so when I read that with this story with Tara, it was just interesting. Just a little sidebar there, which I know everyone loves. So that morning she was wearing the First National Bank of Belen t-shirt, white shorts with green stripes, ankle socks, white and turquoise Avia tennis shoes. She also had on a gold butterfly ring with a diamond on it, a gold amethyst ring, and half-inch gold hoop earrings. She was actually borrowing her mom's neon pink Huffy bike that morning because her own bike had a flat tire from her ride the previous day. So she clipped her Walkman to her shorts, popped in a cassette tape of Boston, which was one of her favorite bands, and she was all set to go. Before she left, she told her mom that she'd be home by noon because she had plans to play tennis with her boyfriend, Jack, and then she had a 3:30 college class. And so she said to her mom, if I'm not back by noon, just come find me on State Route 47. You know where I'll be, because she did the same route basically every day. And her mom, Patty, knew that route. It was a 36-mile ride that went from Belen to Rio Communities, then southwest on State Route 47, where Tara would then turn around at the railroad tracks and head back home. So Tara's telling her mom, if I'm not home by noon, just come drive and find me, please, because I have a busy afternoon. And her mom kind of hesitated for a minute. She said something felt off. And again, this is something that happened every morning. Almost every morning, Tara was out riding this 36-mile ride without incident. But Patty just had kind of a bad feeling. For a while, Patty used to actually ride with Tara, but after a while she stopped. She didn't like the way that a lot of drivers would slow down and kind of stare at them. It made her just incredibly uneasy. And she told Tara this and said, you need to be really careful. Maybe you should carry mace. I don't like how some of these drivers are when we're out bike riding. And Tara kind of, laughed it off. Don't be silly, Mom. I'm not going to live my life being afraid of what's around every corner. She was a very trusting, independent, unafraid girl. And I think things were definitely different in the 80s than they are now, perhaps, because when I read that, and I don't know about you guys or the female listeners, the women listeners out there, I don't consider myself to be a scared person. But I think as a woman, I am much more aware of my surroundings. I certainly, if I'm walking somewhere at night, I am nervous sometimes. I am extra cautious. I carry pepper spray on my keychain. I carry a knife with me at night when I'm out walking the dogs. And that's been for, I was, for any new listeners, I was pretty badly attacked last February, I guess. So about a year ago, when I was out walking one morning without the dogs. I was having an emotional morning and I just needed to get out. So I went for a walk, no dogs, no pepper spray, no knife. And, of course, that was the morning that I was attacked. Luckily, I was ultimately okay, just a pretty bruised and scraped up face. But even prior to that, and again, women listeners, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel that women tend to be, and with good reason, tend to be more fearful. It's difficult to be completely fearless out in the world as a woman today. And that's a whole nother podcast episode that I could get into talking about. So I will leave it at that. But I also understand that feeling of kind of invincibility when you're younger. If I think back to 550 years ago when I was in high school, I remember walking places with my girlfriends at night. My parents definitely didn't know. So sneaking out and walking places or getting in the car with somebody who probably shouldn't have been driving and just feeling like nothing was ever going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to me. And I know most people have had that thought until something does happen. But all that is to say, I would really like to do an entire episode on the ups and downs and ins and out of being a woman in 2025, but this is not the time or place. So I will move on and just kind of wanted to remind everyone to think back as you're listening to like when you were young and felt like nothing bad could ever happen to you. Tara's mom, Patty, definitely worried about this. She worried that Tara was too trusting, which I think is a common attribute of young adults and teenagers. But at the same time, Tara was very strong-willed. She came across as a very fearless person, and she refused to let fear dictate her life. Biking was her escape and was her kind of happy place, and she wasn't going to give that up or stop enjoying it as much because of a few, bad looks from passerbys that her mom noticed. Sorry about that, guys. You know what I dislike is that I'm recording on Zoom and there's no time codes. So I can't see. I had to stop it so that I could cough. And then I started again. And as I'm starting it again, I'm realizing that I look like a boy. So apologies for that as well. So as I was saying, Tara's not going to give up biking or let a few bad looks from passerbys scare her. This is her passion. And so Patty knew, I can't stop her from doing this. All I can do is continue to warn her and ask her to be careful. And so Patty said, okay, go have a good bike ride. And Tara pedaled away. And she was never seen again. So by noon, Tara wasn't home. And Patty wasn't panicking yet. Some days the bike ride did take a little longer than others. She was riding slower. There was traffic, things like that. So Patty wasn't panicking. She was just going to give Tara a few more minutes and then she'd get in the car and go look for her. So by 12:30, she did start to get a little nervous. She wasn't panicking, but she was just like, 30 minutes late is a long time. So she grabbed her keys, she got in the car, and she went to go drive Tara's usual route, assuming she would just run into her. She followed State Route 47. She's scanning both sides of the road, looking for her daughter. No Tara. When she reached the railroad tracks, the spot where Tara usually would turn around, Patty turned around, circled back, still nothing. She had driven the entire route all the way to the end and back, and there was no sign of Tara, no sign of her bike, nothing. She keeps driving it, drives a little outside of it. She's looking. By 3 p.m., she's now panicking. In her head, she's thinking Tara's very responsible. She wouldn't just disappear. She had plans. She told her mom, I have plans to play tennis, and then I have a college class. So she wouldn't just leave. So Patty starts making calls. She reaches out to Tara's friends, to her boyfriend, Jack. She even reaches out to local hospitals, trying to figure out, had anyone seen her? Had anyone heard from her? Nothing. And finally, after exhausting every option that she could think of, Patty called the Valencia County Sheriff's Office. By 10 p.m. that night, Tara was officially reported missing. And by the next morning, search efforts were in full swing, which is when investigators made their first of many chilling discoveries. So search teams scoured Tara's route, and soon they did start finding a few things. First, they discovered bike tire tracks in the dirt. And at first glance, it looked like maybe a bike had collided with a car. Now, again, I don't know what that looks like in dirt. Like, you see bike tracks, you see car tracks. I guess if they run into each other, you maybe assume that they collided, perhaps. But then a little further along, the tracks suddenly stopped, and then there were footprints. So they took this as some type of disturbance happened here, whether the car and the bike made contact with each other or almost did, and then the person on the bike, who at this point they're hoping maybe was Tara, got off the bike and is, to talk to the people in the car. Again, these are all just possibilities that they're kind of possible scenarios they're running through their head. And then they found something else scattered close to along the roadside where the tire tracks were, and what on Tara's, usual route were pieces of what they believed were a broken Walkman. And a few miles from that, they eventually found a Boston cassette tape, which again was Tara's favorite band. As they kept searching, investigators found pieces of a shattered bike taillight. Now, was it from Tara's mom's pink Huffy bike? Was the Walkman Tara's Walkman? No one could say for sure. Tara's mom, Patty, believed that it was. She was convinced that if Tara had been attacked or abducted, that Tara may have tried to leave clues behind on purpose, such as the shattered bike taillight, Boston cassette tape, pieces of the Walkman. Then investigators also found beer cans. Scattered near the scene, they found empty cans of Milwaukee's Best beer. And whenever I hear Milwaukee's Best, which is not frequently, I don't often hear that. And I could be totally wrong about this, but I think people used to call it the Beast in high school. I mean, I grew up in Chicago, which is not far from Milwaukee, so definitely that beer was drinking. Anyways, empty cans of Milwaukee's Best beer, which is not the best beer in my opinion, but no offense to anyone who enjoys that beer. The problem was with all of these things, the bike taillight, the Boston cassette tape, the broken Walkman, none of them could be definitively linked to Tara. No one could say definitely this came from her Walkman. Again, this is 1988. So, while fingerprinting is a thing, DNA and forensic investigation is, light years behind where we are today. Sorry, that felt like I was mansplaining that to everyone. You guys already know. If you're listening to a true crime podcast, you know that. I don't need to say that. The only thing that was clear during these initial stages of the investigation was that Tara and her mom's bike were nowhere to be found. And then witnesses started coming forward. So as police started questioning people, they realized that there were several witnesses that had seen Tara that morning. Between 9:30, which is about when Tara left for her bike ride, so between 9:30 and 11:15 a.m., multiple people saw her riding along State Route 47. At 11:30 a.m. specifically, 2 ranch workers said that they saw her heading back home. So she had made it to the railroad tracks, turned around, and then was heading back in the other direction. Now, I'm not assuming that these ranch workers know where she lived, but based on the direction that she was traveling in, they were able to tell, the investigators were able to tell she was likely heading back home. And then at 11:45, there were, I have in my notes 3 additional witnesses. It could have been more. 3 additional witnesses that saw her at 11:45. But this time, these witnesses, it was a little different. They reported seeing a white pickup truck following her very closely. One of the witnesses said it looked like the truck was shadowing her. And inside the truck, there were 2 men. So the witnesses, which were eventually 5 separate witnesses that reported seeing this white pickup truck following closely behind Tara around 11:45 a.m. They described the truck as a white or light colored Ford, 1953 to 1955, which is crazy, with a camper shell. They said there were 2 men inside the truck. The driver was a white male with red hair, 35 to 45 years old, 5'9" to 6 feet, 200 pounds. Now, how the hell do you know approximately how tall someone is or how much they weigh when you are just seeing them in a car passing by? I have no idea, but fine. And then they did get that the license plate was either WBY or WBZ, and then the last letter was a 6. And these 5 separate witnesses who reported seeing this pickup truck following her and seeing 2 men inside of it and seeing her, they were the last people to ever see Tara. And it was just about 2 miles from her home. Now, all of this seems like really good information, intel, clues. It seems really useful. I mean, this is descriptive. This seems like a lot to happen within the first, day or several days. But the problem was that no one saw an actual abduction. It was like she was there and then she wasn't. And just as search efforts are ramping up, now they have all this information about the white truck and the possible men driving it. So the search efforts are really ramping up, and then a storm rolls in. A big storm with heavy, heavy rain and strong winds. And just like that, whatever evidence was left was likely washed away. And that was the exact moment that the case already kind of began to stall. Now, despite the storm making it more difficult, they didn't stop searching for Tara, certainly. And at first, the Valencia County Sheriff's Office was leading the investigation. But as the days stretched into weeks with no sign of Tara, the FBI and even the Air Force joined in. There were several big searches for her, in addition to people searching all the time. Some of these big searches, it was hundreds of people, law enforcement, volunteers, community members. They all came together to comb the area. They were on horseback, on ATVs. There were helicopters and small planes covering the area. But no matter how many people and how hard they looked, there was nothing. No body, no bike, and now after the storm, no clear evidence. So with each passing day, it was a very harsh reality that began to sink in that whoever took Tara also took her bike, and that was going to make it very difficult to find anything. The Department of Public Safety issued a chilling statement saying that we have felt from the beginning that this was an abduction. But again, no body, no solid leads. The case continued to stall, and those weeks turned into months. And then it was almost a year later that something surfaced that changed everything. So let's fast forward to June 1989. It is almost a year after Tara vanished. A woman is walking through the parking lot of a grocery store in Port St. Joe, Florida, which is nearly 1,500 miles away from Belen, New Mexico. And this woman's just walking from her car to the entrance of a grocery store, and she saw something on the ground. It was a Polaroid photo sitting on the ground of the parking lot face up. And at first she was curious. She just kind of noticed it and thought, weird, and bent down to pick it up. And when she did, her stomach dropped because in the Polaroid, there were two people, what looked like a teenage girl and a young boy, lying on what looked like a bed in the back of a van or a bus. Both of them had their hands tied behind their backs. Both of them had duct tape over their mouths, and both of them looked terrified. So the woman immediately ran inside and called the police. She told officers that when she had first entered the store, she did notice a windowless Toyota cargo van parked outside. But when she came out of the store, the van was driving away. She got a quick glance at the driver. She said it was a man in his 30s with a mustache. So police very quickly rushed to set up roadblocks, but the van was never found. The Polaroid was released to the public, and it did not take long until this Polaroid reached Tara's family via the news and media. Patty, Tara's mom, took one look at the photo, and she was completely convinced it was Tara. And when she spoke to police, she said, the girl in the photo has a scar on her leg, and Tara has the exact same scar from a bike accident. And next to the girl in the photo was a V.C. Andrews book called My Sweet Audrina, and that was one of Tara's favorite books. And the girl look, when I first read this, my first thought was, what the fuck? Like, what do you think? You're convinced it's your daughter? How do you not know? If I saw a picture of my sister or my mom or my dad or, Mark, like that's either them or it's not, right? Well, it was not the clearest photo. It was a Polaroid. It had also been sitting in a parking lot, so it was a little bit. It was clear enough, but it was. I have it, so I'll have to post it. I know I say that every episode, and I haven't. But I'm gonna dump a bunch of photos from recent episodes. So it's a little weird to me that her family could look at this photo and think it's Tara, but not be 100% sure. So that's something that kind of sticks out in my mind as being kind of weird. And the weirdness doesn't end there. So the boy in the photo looked a lot like a boy named Michael Henley, who was a 9-year-old who had gone missing from New Mexico just a few months before Tara. This, of course, is sending investigators and the public into a tailspin, thinking, oh my gosh, Tara and Michael were both kidnapped by the same person. Investigators brought in some experts to analyze the photo because it was just unclear to everyone whether this was Tara and Michael or it wasn't. So they brought in Scotland Yard. I feel like there's more to dig there, but I did not. But Scotland Yard said, yes, according to our experts, the girl in the photo is Tara. Los Alamos National Lab disagreed, said, no, the girl in the photo is not Tara. The FBI, their experts, said, inconclusive. And then the case took another unexpected turn. So this was the biggest, most confusing, and the biggest clue that they had seen in a while. But it didn't really go anywhere because, again, no one could discern if this actually was Tara or not. Not 100% at least. And then in 1990, so just a few months later, the remains of Michael Henley were discovered in the New Mexico wilderness, that 9-year-old boy. It was determined that he had died from exposure. So he wasn't the boy in the Polaroid. That would have been impossible because he had been dead for too long to have made it possible for him to be in that Polaroid. So if the boy in the Polaroid wasn't him, who was it? And again, still the question of, was the girl Tara? To this day, No one really knows. So, over the years, the mystery of Tara's disappearance has sparked dozens of different theories. Theories from people in the community, friends, law enforcement, the online community, the web sleuths, which I will say some of these web sleuths on the actual website, web sleuths, or on Reddit are incredible. What they can dig out and find. And some of these theories seemed absolutely plausible, and some seemed completely out there, and some seemed too terrifying to not be true. So I'm going to tell you the 3 most well-known and popular theories. I don't want to say popular, but popular. So one of the first theories was that a serial kidnapper or serial killer abducted Tara. The Polaroid suggests, if we're going to assume that the Polaroid was her, that she was taken, held captive. A lot of people believed that it was for either human trafficking or sadistic reasons like Satanism. But if this was the case, the kind of devil's advocate argument here is, why was there never another sighting of her? No trace of her anywhere. I mean, it seems like kind of an obvious theory. Like, yeah, duh. Of course, that's a possibility that a serial kidnapper or killer took her. We don't just nobody's thinking, oh, it was just like a nice old man who happened to pick her up by mistake and then she was never seen again. No, of course not. The second theory is actually called the toy box killer theory because, and if you have been listening for a while, you know that we did like a 2 or 3 part episode on the toy box killer. Otherwise, his real name is David Parker Ray. He abducted and killed women or tortured them in basically why isn't the word escaping me? It was like a trailer that you attach to a car, basically. A box car, like the back of a truck, that he had in the middle of like a field on his property. And his property was not far from where Tara disappeared. He also closely resembled the sketch of the truck driver that those witnesses saw the day that she disappeared. But after more investigation, I don't have the details as to why investigators did rule him out. Now, the third theory is one of the most chilling theories, and if you want my opinion, which nobody asked for, I'm going to give it to you anyways. I think this is very possibly what happened. So, in 2008, a former sheriff's deputy a former sheriff's deputy came forward with shocking information. He claimed that 2 local teenagers had hit Tara with their truck. And instead of helping her, they panicked and tried to cover it up. According to Sheriff Renee Rivera, a group of boys who knew Tara had been following her that day. Something happened, some kind of accident, and instead of calling for help, they abducted her, and she didn't survive. Now, here's where it gets even darker, as if that isn't dark enough. Sheriff Rivera claimed he knew the names of those involved, but without a body, he said he couldn't make a case. Some accounts that I found suggest that Tara had received threatening notes on her car in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. There is some rumor that a local boy had asked her out and she rejected him, and this made him angry. And that is why he's one of the boys who was kind of tailing her on her bike and, messing with her, maybe just tapping her back tire or getting so close to scare her, like not actually just full on running into her, but torturing her a little bit. And then that it went a little too far. A lot of people believe that this goes all the way up to the sheriff's office because one of the suspects was the son of the sheriff himself. So over the years, many people have accused the police department investigators for protecting one of their own, including Tara's stepfather, John Dole. He was furious. He didn't understand why, if the sheriff knew what happened to Tara or had a good estimation of what happened to Tara. Why wasn't he making arrests? Why wasn't he bringing anyone in? He believed, Tara's stepfather, that there was enough circumstantial evidence to convict somebody, but no one was charged. And for decades, this case bounced between the sheriff's administrations, cold case units, and the FBI. New leads would surface, new suspects would be named, but every time, nothing came of it. Now, Tara's family, of course, never stopped searching for answers. Her mother, Patty, moved to Florida in 2003, but never gave up hope. She kept Tara's bedroom untouched for years, and every year left Christmas presents in there in case Tara ever came home. That breaks my heart. And unfortunately, in 2006, after years of heartbreak, Patty passed away without ever knowing what happened to her daughter, which is just awful. And that was terrible timing for Henry to drop his bone on the floor. So for years, Tara's family held on to hope that that Polaroid photo found in 1989 was proof that she had been alive after her abduction. But again, nothing concrete ever came of it. But in 2009, 20 years after the infamous Polaroid, something else strange happened. A new set of eerie images appeared. So David Barnes, the police chief in Port St. Joe, Florida, where that Polaroid was found, he was no stranger to the Polaroid mystery because that's where the original photo had been found. And in June 2009, he received something very chilling. I know I've said chilling a lot in this case, but that's because it is a chilling case. So 2 anonymous letters, both postmarked from Albuquerque, New Mexico, arrived exactly 2 months apart to the police chief in Florida. They arrived on June 10th, 2009 and August 10th, 2009. And inside one of the envelopes was a photo printed on copy paper. The image was a young boy with sandy brown hair. And the creepy part is that someone had drawn a black band over his mouth in ink, as if they were trying to kind of mimic the duct tape from the original 1989 Polaroid. The second letter contained the same exact photo, but the original, and without the black marker. And then 2 days after that, a newspaper in Port St. Joe received a third letter. This letter was also postmarked in Albuquerque and contained the same image of the boy with black marker drawn over his mouth again. None of them had a return address. None of them had any explanation. The only thing that was really clear about this is that whoever sent them wanted someone to see this photo. Again, was it connected to Tara? Maybe, maybe not. Law enforcement immediately, when these photos were found or these letters were mailed to the police department and then the newspaper in 2009, law enforcement immediately considered the possibility that these images were linked to Tara's disappearance. Now, I read that and I thought, well, why? I mean, we're talking 20 years apart, and this is a photo of a boy. And it's not the same boy from the original Polaroid. It does resemble him, but it's not the same one. And there's no girl in the photo. So what does this have to do with Tara or her case? It seems far-fetched. However, Albuquerque had been tied to the case. This case took place in New Mexico. The white pickup truck that was following her had New Mexico plates. And one of those theories of the serial kidnapper or killer was that her abductors had taken her out of state, possibly to Florida, which is perhaps why this kidnapper with these pictures of the boy was sending it to the sheriff's department in Florida. It feels a little wobbly to me. I'm not going to lie. They ultimately didn't find anything out about these photos of this boy. And so they couldn't connect it to Tara's case. Another layer of mystery that was right around the same time these letters were sent was a self-proclaimed psychic called in a tip. She told police that she once worked in a strip club in California with a runaway girl who was later murdered. This psychic claimed that she had visions and dreams suggesting that the runaway girl was Tara and that she could be buried somewhere in California. Authorities, are willing to go examine and look at and check out anything at this point. It's many, many years after Tara's gone and there are still no answers. So they conducted some searches around the areas that this so-called psychic thought Tara might be buried, but they found nothing. The letters and photos that had been mailed to Port St. Joe were handed over to the FBI. They were hoping for fingerprints, DNA, because now we're 20 years post her disappearance. There's a very, much more, sorry, there are much greater advances in forensics. So they were hoping to pull something off of these letters, the envelopes, the stamps, whatever. Nothing. No answers came from it. What's really weird to me is that over the years, more strange Polaroids have surfaced that some people have believed might show Tara. This is hard for me to get on board with, but I'm going to share it. In Montecito, California, a blurry Polaroid was found near a construction site. It shows a girl's face with tape covering her mouth. Behind her is light blue striped fabric, which is a very similar fabric seen on the pillow in the original Polaroid. But the film used for this particular photo apparently wasn't even available until June of 1989, which was months after Tara vanished. Doesn't mean that it couldn't be her or have to do with her. Maybe this is a serial kidnapper who is involved in human trafficking and takes photos of his or her victims. In the second photo that turned up over the years shows a woman loosely bound in gauze. Her eyes are covered and she's wearing large black framed glasses. She's sitting next to a male passenger on an Amtrak train. And this film wasn't available until February 1990. Tara's mother apparently, these photos surfaced prior to her mother's death, so she did see both of them. She did believe that the first photo could have been Tara, the one near the construction site, but the second one she thought was likely a hoax. Tara's sister Michelle later said, quote, "They had a striking, uncalming resemblance. As for me, I will not rule them out. But keep in mind, our family has had to identify many other photographs, and all but those three were ruled out." So no conclusions were ever drawn, and Tara is still missing. In 2013, the FBI reopened the investigation into Tara's case. A 6-person task force was assembled to re-examine everything. They were tasked with going through decades of evidence, theories, witness statements, all of it. Sheriff Louis Burkhart explained in a quote, he said, "We felt that we should take a good, close look at all of the evidence that's been gathered over the years, and hopefully we'll come up with something that will assist us. We don't know if she's alive, but it is certainly a possibility." And right around this time, a shocking new lead emerged. A man named Henry Brown made a deathbed confession to the police. Henry Brown told investigators that shortly after Tara's disappearance, he had been inside the basement of a man named Lawrence Romero Jr. And while he was there, he saw a body. A young woman wrapped in a blue tarp, buried in a makeshift grave in the basement. And then Romero Jr. and 2 other men that were there told him the truth and said to Henry Brown, "That's Tara." Brown claimed that on the morning Tara disappeared, a group of 4 men, Lawrence Romero Jr., Dave Silva, a 3rd man with red hair, and a 4th man named Leroy Chavez, were driving a truck along her bike route. They spotted Tara and tried to get her attention, but in the process, they hit her. Instead of helping her, they threw her into the truck. They drove her to a gravel pit where they sexually assaulted her. And when Tara threatened to go to the police, Romero Jr. stabbed her to death. The others held her down while he did it. At first, they hid her body in the bushes, but when searches for Tara started, they moved her body to Lawrence Romero Jr.'s basement. And that's where Henry Brown saw her. Brown told the police that the men threatened to kill him if he ever told anyone what he saw. And Henry also said that he believed they got away with it because Lawrence Romero Jr.'s father was the sheriff at the time. According to Henry Brown, the parents of the other suspects helped to cover up the crime along with Lawrence Romero Jr.'s father, the sheriff. Brown even claimed that he had once come across a written confession from Lawrence Romero Jr., a note where he admitted to Tara's murder, but then he destroyed it. Brown believed that after keeping Tara's body in the basement for some time, the men later dumped her in a pond near one of their homes. He also claimed that they took Tara's bike to a junkyard and discarded of it. Another separate witness came forward years later saying that one of the suspects had confessed to him as well. Lawrence Romero Jr. unfortunately died by suicide in 1991, and without a body, no charges were ever filed. There has been long-standing speculation about how aggressively the case was investigated at the time, because a lot of the theories that linked Tara's disappearance to Lawrence Romero Jr., which was Sheriff Lawrence Romero's son, this fueled suspicions of corruption, cover-ups. This was talked about a lot. Many people in the community apparently believe that the sheriff's department was covering something up. But everyone, of course, has denied this. All official people from the sheriff's office, police department, investigators, they've all denied this. The original investigator, Flores, said, "You're talking about a young lady with a family who cares for her." No, there was no cover-up. There were a lot of rumors, yes, but no cover-up. I don't know how that's a terrible quote. It doesn't tell us anything, really. So nothing really came of this deathbed confession. It just kind of further fueled the suspicions that there was a cover-up and that the sheriff's office was involved. In 2016, Lieutenant Joseph Rowland of the Valencia County Sheriff's Office was assigned to the investigation into the disappearance of Tara Calico. They were going to do new forensic testing on old evidence, but there were no major breakthroughs with that, unfortunately. Early reports mentioned, as I mentioned in this episode, finding a cassette tape, pieces of a Walkman, and broken plastic. But over time, those items were ruled out as evidence and disappeared. So this Lieutenant Joseph Rowland has confirmed that they have no physical evidence to rely on. Other alleged discoveries over the years, a pink bicycle, underwear with the initials TC on it. None of this ever amounted to more than just rumors in the case files. There were claims of this, people who said they came across this, detectives and investigators who claimed that they did have this evidence, but by 2016, this evidence was gone. There was nothing really for them to test anymore. They tested on whatever they could. I don't have a list of that, but the main things, the cassette tape, the pieces of a Walkman, the possible back taillight plastic, all gone. And during this reinvestigation, Lieutenant Rowland discovered that the sheriff's office had never even collected or tested those items, which caused him to question, did they ever exist? Was this just complete rumors? Because he wasn't around at that initial investigation. And this wasn't the first time, apparently, that evidence had been lost or mishandled in the case. Investigator Flores, the original investigator, revealed that key investigative reports had been lost over time, including evidence from other cases that he thought might be linked to Tara's disappearance. Just before she vanished, Investigator Flores had been investigating a drug ring operating out of the Rio Communities Motel, not far from where Tara was last seen. During that investigation, they found a car, a suitcase containing telephone wiring that appeared to have been used to tie someone up. And when Flores went to follow up on this suitcase years later, a detective told him, "Oh, I destroyed it." Flores believes that forensic testing could have been done on that evidence, and he still wonders to this day if it might have been connected to Tara's case. So I mean, blows my mind. Oh, I destroyed it. What do you mean? Is that really? I don't know. And I don't know if anyone who doesn't work in law enforcement knows. Is that, was that just because this was in the 80s and 90s? Were there less strict rules on evidence where you could just destroy it? I mean, I genuinely don't know. I'm asking that if anyone listening knows, because that seems just crazy to me that so much evidence and so much, just important evidence. Sorry to use that twice, but evidence could be gone, lost, never tested. In 2017, Tara's friend Melinda Escobar started a podcast and documentary investigation. She believes that she knows what happened. She says, quote, "She was being stalked. She had turned someone down for a date and they were not happy about it. They started messing with her, asking her to go to a party, getting real close to her. The boys were drunk and high and they hit her and knocked her off her bike. We believe she took off running to the east. After that, Melinda thinks that the boys sexually assaulted her friend Tara and then killed her to prevent her from speaking out. Melinda Escobar has said herself that she's been threatened for speaking out. She says, quote, "It started to put my life in danger. I started having threats. People were showing up at my mother's house. My niece came to me and told me that the guys that did it were really angry and that if I didn't stop, someone would get hurt. And if I didn't stop, someone would get killed." She didn't stop, though. I cannot believe I don't have it written down, but I believe the podcast is called Vanished. I need to fact check that. But I believe the podcast, and it's an entire podcast series about this case. In 2019, so that was in 2017, she started the podcast. It's definitely out by now. In 2019, the FBI offered a $20,000 reward for information on Tara's whereabouts. In 2021, the Valencia County Sheriff's Office announced a sealed warrant had been issued for a private residence. They had a new lead, but they would not say what it was. In 2023, the sheriff's office held a press conference announcing, quote, "We believe we have enough evidence to submit this case for review of potential charges." Lieutenant Rowland, while not speaking for the past, believes that they are closer than ever to identifying those responsible, people he says were part of the community all along. He said, quote, "We as investigators believe we have an answer. We believe we know what occurred and who's responsible." However, with a case this old, the statute of limitations has long expired for most related crimes. I mean, not murder. But prosecutors will have to follow the laws from 1988, apparently, which could make pursuing this a little bit difficult. Nonetheless, the case was sent to the district attorney's office, and a team is now reviewing more than 3 decades of case files. As far as the public knows, there is still no body, no official suspect, and no definitive proof. And as of today, Tara Calico's case remains one of the most troubling unsolved cases of all time. Now, 2023 wasn't that long ago. 3 decades of case files takes a while, I'd imagine, to review. So this is definitely one that I plan to follow up on and continue to look into. And I do have a little bit here about that podcast. So Melinda Escobar, the one who started the podcast, she was friends with Tara in high school. They met in the high school marching band, and she spent years investigating the case in her own time. She said, quote, "My team and I have already solved it." And she was, this interview is from a while ago, back in 2017, I believe, but she was working on a docuseries and has a podcast. The Valencia County Sheriff's Office actually gave her a chance to go through Tara's case files, which she says that she organized and digitized and was working with professional private investigators. And then she offered up her findings to police. She's still not not happy with how the case has been handled. She said, these are sources that I spent years developing and gaining trust with, and a lot of that was broken. I'm sorry, I'm just looking through this interview again. And then that she believes she knows what happened. They knocked her off her bike and sexually assaulted her. She, with the podcast and the docuseries, wants to continue shining a light on this case. And Lieutenant Rowland says he still gets tips every couple months. New people come forward. And unfortunately, the only people that he can talk to about this and be in contact with is Tara's siblings. Both of her parents are now deceased. And what a tragic thing to die without ever knowing what happened to your daughter. So I really sincerely hope that the DA's office is able to arrest the people who did this. I will keep looking into it and following up and keep you guys posted. And until then, I would love to hear what you think happened. Do you think she was kidnapped, killed in an accident, and covered up? What about all the Polaroids? I'd love to hear what you think. I would encourage you. I know that I don't typically do this, but I would encourage you to share this episode with someone to keep this story alive and out there. You never know who might hear this, who might have seen something, remember something, heard something. And if you have any information about Tara Calico's disappearance, you can contact the Valencia County Sheriff's Office at 505-866-2400 or the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or online at tips.fbi.gov. And I want to say thank you guys for listening. I promised myself I wasn't going to bring up the mouth noises or anything like that. And I was just going to record like a real professional person. So hopefully I accomplished that. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Thoughts and prayers are with all of Tara's remaining family and friends, and really hope that they are able to get some answers on this case at some point soon. So I will keep you guys posted about that. Again, if you have the time and the thought to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, that really helps the podcast find new listeners. You can now comment on Spotify on individual episodes. I guess, even though I look like absolute hot trash right now, I will put this video on Spotify and YouTube in case anyone's dying to watch someone looking pretty trashy tell a true crime story. So, because I'm sure there are tons of people who like that. And I will be back tomorrow with a bonus episode. I have a true crime mini story that does not take place in the Southwest. I haven't decided, to be honest, because I have a lot of things to tell you guys about and update you on, and just discuss. So we'll see. But for those of you who listen just for the true crime and do not care for the life updates and kind of chaotic all over the place episodes, tomorrow, whether I do the mini crime story or not, I am going to spend some time kind of catching you up. I want to tell you guys about Flagstaff and the Grand Canyon. And I got contacted by a private investigator and just a few other things. So that's just my pre-warning to listeners who are listening just for the true crime and do not like me. Tomorrow will not be the episode for you. But hopefully today was enjoyable. I hope I did it justice telling this story, and I hope this story stays out there for Tara's sake. So thank you guys for listening. I love you all. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. Okay. Bye, guys.
Death by Southwest is hosted by Jenna Schneider and Margot Carmichael.
Executive produced by Margot Carmichael.
Produced by Jenna Schneider.
Audio editing and sound design by Margot Carmichael.
Music by Soundstripe.
And a special thanks to Edward R. Murrow for letting us borrow his famous sign-off phrase, "Good night and good luck."